my channel. Thank you guys for joining me, and thank you for watching these videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share these videos. I'm trying to increase the number of subscribers. Today's topic is pilot shortage. Unless you have been living under a rock for the past 6 months, I'm sure you have seen or heard about the pilot shortage. What's causing it and who is responsible? Right off the bat, it's the airline's fault. It's not merely due to an increase in the number of people flying. It's because of blatant mismanagement, absolute incompetence by the airlines. What do I mean? Most sectors, most industry, finance, tech, construction, engineering, intentionally engage with young adults during their college years in an effort to encourage them to join their sector. Aviation don't do this. What aviation does instead is wait for a child to have his or her first interaction with an airplane, fall in love with it, and decide, I want to be a pilot. After that engagement, he or she is off to being a pilot. There is no foresight. There is no active, continuous recruiting effort by the aviation sector. In instances where they do get involved, it is short term, and it's always in the midst of a crisis, such as the one we have now. What they do is enter into agreement with a training center to take their current student and flow them to a specific regional airline, and it can only be a regional airline. I will tell you why that is the case in a few minutes. The issue with that agreement is this. The FAA, following a Colgan crash in Buffalo, New York some years ago, changed the rule. They changed the requirements necessary to become an airline pilot. You need to have 1,500 hours, and you need to be an airline transport pilot rating before you can step 1 foot in a plane that carry more than 50 passengers, I think. Or I think the rule is industry-wide, because even if you're working for a 135 that carry passengers, you still need to have an ATP, and you still need to have 1,500 hours. This was a safety related change. Additionally, the FAA also make the rest rules more stringent, meaning pilots has to have the adequate amount of rest based on the amount of time they're on duty. The airlines is currently lobbying Congress to get this rule changed. Their argument is it is preventing them from effectively recruiting pilots to address the pilot shortage. On the other hand, the parents of those who lost their siblings in that crash are also lobbying Congress to make sure those rules remain in place. I'm supporting the parent. This was a safety related issue, and it is not the main cause of the pilot shortage. It's a contributing cause, but it's also a safety related issue that should not be changed because of pure mismanagement of its human capital by the airlines. Next is training. Training is, it's expensive, and the rewards are not guaranteed, and it's not immediate. Also, believe it or not, a lot of people don't know in 2022 that you can become a pilot, that being a pilot is a viable career if you get lucky. Imagine this. I decided Let's say I decide I don't want to go to college. I just finished high school and I like working with my hands. I decide I want to get into the construction sector. Most of these jobs don't require a degree, but it does require a level of certificate related training. It is inexpensive when compared to becoming a pilot. From the time I get my first job, forward 3 years, get, assuming I put the adequate amount of effort in, I can be making anywhere between $80 to $100,000 in 3 years. Compare this to being an airline pilot where I have to go to college. Between the cost of my flight training and the cost of my degree, I'm looking at a student loan anywhere between 175,000 to 200,000. From the time I leave college and I get my first job 3 years on, I will be lucky. I mean extremely lucky if I'm making anywhere between $50 and $70,000 a year. Assuming I'm a young, rational, reasonable person, looking at the pluses and the minuses based on my finances, why in the world would I choose to become a pilot unless I am truly, truly in love with it? It is amazing that in 2022, there are young adults out there who don't know that becoming a pilot is available and it's a viable career. This return to what I said initially, that the airlines lack foresight. The airlines or the aviation sector in general do not actively recruit personnel to become pilot. They sit and they wait. The result of this is a lack or a reduction in the number of people training to become pilots. When I did my training, I got my commercial pilot license, I think in 2003 or 2005. When I was going through my training, about 90 to 95% of my fellow students were from Asian countries. They were from China, Malaysia, Korea, and there were a bunch of them from India. Very few of them were from America, and this was some 20 years ago. Imagine what it's like today. The aviation sector also failed to realize that it's competing for the same labor force. It's competing with technology, it's competing with engineering, it's competing with construction, it's competing with the home improvement sector, and it's competing with those who want to be entrepreneurs. Aviation failure to realize that it needs to work harder to convince people to join us is, in my opinion, the biggest reason for the pilot shortage. It is also the, as I've initially said, the mismanagement by the airline industry. What did they do? Okay. During the pandemic, there were obviously less people flying because the government told them not to, because it was safer. What the airlines did, and correctly so, were to park planes. And it is a process to park a plane. Since they are not flying that many planes, they don't need that many pilots. As a result, some of the pilots were allowed to be at home for over a year, while some were flying periodically. When the pandemic is over and the government says, okay, you can fly again, that the citizens can fly again, people begin to fly in droves. The result was, because the airlines failed to anticipate this happening, the pilots that were at home sitting for over a year, their certification lapse. They are literally not able to fly a plane until they go to recurrent training. Recurrent training can take anywhere between 3 days to 7 days, depending on the airline and the type of aircraft. If you're someone like United who has thousands of pilots, imagine you will let 1,000 of those pilots currency lapse. That's 1,000 pilots you cannot use until you retrain them. Your training facility is not equipped to train so many pilots in a short space of time. Now you have to space them out. While this is happening, the amount of people flying has increased. The plane you parked, you have removed them out of storage and reintroduced them to the flight line. You have no one to fly them. What do you do naturally as a business that's trying to survive? You cut your routes. You start flying to less places. If you go to less places, you're gonna have more passengers wanting to book those flights that are going to those places that you are going to. This is the airline's fault. Their failure to plan during the pandemic, their failure to plan after the pandemic, their failure to plan for the long term after the taxpayers had bailed them out so they can keep people employed is disappointing for me as someone who is a member of the aviation sector and someone who love what I do and love the sector. It is also noteworthy to know that the pilot shortage is not affecting each subsection of aviation equally. And this has to do with how a pilot career progresses. Your first entry into the airline sector will take you into the regionals. The regionals are partnered with the major airlines, except for Southwest. Southwest is the only company that don't have a regional partner. All the rest do. American, United, Delta, they all use regional partners. And one of the most or the biggest regional partner is SkyWest Airlines. They're based in Utah. The way the pilot career work is, you hope that your time at the regional is between 4 to 6 years. In that time, you're hoping to become a captain. Once you become a captain, you apply to one of the majors, the Southwest, United, Delta, American, and you hope that they pick you up as a first officer. There is a catch here though. The majors don't want to cannibalize the pilots from the regionals. If they do that, it's impossible for the regionals to do their job. As such, the majors are very deliberate in how many pilots they take from the regionals every year. This is in a normal situation. Now let's add the pandemic in. You have the regionals where the majors normally pull from. Those guys are not current. Those guys and girls are not current either. They still need to be current. You have an increased demand from the public to fly with the majors. The majors don't have current pilots either to make those flights. They cannot pull from the regionals because they don't want to cannibalize the regionals. And the regionals don't have qualified guys and gals either. The majors is literally going through the same thing. The point is, the pilot shortage, while it's to a greater degree affecting the regional when compared to the major airlines, In my world, where we fly privately, where we fly business jets, or some people like to call it corporate, there is a pilot shortage, but it's not to the same degree as it is with the airlines. And there is a reason for that. Most people who most people flew business class and first class prior to the pandemic because they never thought they could afford to fly private, or they just thought it was not necessary. During the pandemic, believe it or not, there was an increase in the number of people wanting to fly private. Most of them realized that they can afford it and they like the service. They love the service. Companies responded by ordering additional aircraft to meet the demand. This additional aircraft obviously required more pilots. Thus, our pilot shortage is clearly a result of an increase in demand and not a result of poor management by the 135 companies or the Part 91 owners. As you can see, as I've explained, the reason for the shortage on both sides of the spectrum is different. When it comes to the airline, it's a blatant mismanagement of their resources. It is not purely because of the increase in the amount of people flying. All right, that's it for this video. I hope it was informative and helpful. If you guys have any questions or comments about anything I've said, please leave them below and I will respond to them personally. That's it for this one, guys. Until next time, be good and don't forget to subscribe. Talk to you guys in the next one.